Oki nexukoax, nistu anokok sakwainamahka, numah tu Piikani. Hello everyone, my name is Terran Last Gun. I am originally from Browning, Montana, but now I currently reside in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I'm a member of the Piikani Nation, also called Blackfeet. And I am here at the Missoula Art Museum for my solo exhibition titled Terran Last Gun, Future Cosmic Energy. So for this solo exhibition, the works date back to 2019 up to the present. And it's a mix of works. There's serigraphs, also known as screen prints, and ledger drawings. And they're both different techniques, but what I'm doing with all of my work, whether it's those two mediums or murals or photography, is I'm sort of visually documenting and recording my experiences as a Piikani person, an Indigenous person, but also just a human person and the human experience. I research, I collect books. Some of the topics include my own tribe, Piikani or Blackfeet, but also the larger Blackfoot Confederacy. And so my nation, my tribe, we're part of the Blackfoot Confederacy, also known as Siksikaitsitapi, and also Nitsitapi, which means real people. And it includes the South Piikani, my tribe, North Piikani, Siksika, and Gana. And so collectively, we're known as the Blackfoot Confederacy. We all speak Blackfoot language, and we all paint our lodges very similar in the same manner. And that's what this work here is partly inspired by, is our painted lodges, also called teepees, but I like to call them lodges. And a lot of the narratives that are part of that can be seen throughout these works. I like to collect anything just to do with Blackfoot stories, knowledge. So color is a huge part of my work, and I'm very much interested in other artists' thoughts on color and just color in general, the science, the spirituality of it, the feeling, emotion that it creates, and then the shapes. So I think shape and color create a lot. They have the power to create feeling and energy and activate each other through the colors. And so the books I've like to read and artists I read about are Frank Stella's early works, Frederick Hammersley, who was a New Mexico artist and did geometric works, and Jeff Cam, the late Jeff Cam. He was a Plains Cree artist and also an instructor at II, the Institute of American Indian Arts. And so his work is definitely, it's very powerful work and lots of colors. And he was into hard edge painting and this idea of Indigenous abstraction. And that's what I feel my work is playing with as well. It's abstract yet full of meaning and stories, and has sort of multiple layers, and even visually it looks like it's layered. And that comes from just thinking about that, is like mountains and rocks and the geology and these different layers, and even throughout the plains, the different lines you see, flat lines. And my father is probably my biggest mentor in terms of art and culture. So I grew up dancing, going to powwows, and my mom and my dad both would take me to different powwows along with my grandma Thelma. And that was very performance art, and it's very much a part of Indigenous cultures, especially Blackfoot people. They're part of the ceremonies. There's different actions and dance movements and human movements that you're doing, and so I never thought of it as performance art until I went to II, where I learned more about art history and just writing and talking about art. I started to realize that I did grow up dancing, and that is a form of art and performance art. And seeing all the colors, it's all about color. What's your regalia going to look like, and what colors do you want? And so that definitely was my introduction to being like I was really attracted to colors and complementing colors that vibrate, colors that activate and create energy. And so, yeah, I definitely got to credit that, but I didn't want to be an artist. I didn't want to pursue the same path as my dad, and I wanted to do other things. And so I went to Blackfeet Community College. I received an AS in environmental science. But while there, I took a Blackfeet art course and learned more about what our art forms were. And it did include those lodge symbols. And was more like, oh, this is interesting. We took a school trip to Canada, and it was the Glenbow Museum. And there was 5 Blackfoot war shirts loaned that were brought over from England, University of Oxford. And the BCC took a bunch of students up to see them. And we got there and we went into the collection itself and saw these shirts laid out. And it was just such an incredible experience to see these old war shirts, this old, hand put together creativeness of like sewing everything together. It had discs in the middle, not all of them, but a lot of them, and that represented the sun, and possibly other things as well. And I was just blown away by that experience of knowing that our cultural items were out so far away, but yet they were able to come back. And it just made me realize, like, oh, the museum, world I think it had a negative, I think for Native people, for Indigenous people, when we think of museums, it can be a negative way because they have items that, they didn't want to give back before NAGPRA. But I realized that, we could, if we got into this field, we could also share this knowledge and create our own spaces. And that's what led to going to II. And so it was at II where I decided I wanted to take art classes and I wanted to get that degree, but I felt like I wasn't an artist. And even though I was creating for taking it so serious, I still didn't think I was an artist until after I graduated. Yeah, eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to take this serious. I was working part-time and also trying to create when I had access. And then the pandemic hit, and the part-time job I had then, which was at a gallery, I was laid off, because of the pandemic and all of that. And that's what really sort of kicked me into survival mode. And I was already doing art and selling art through markets, working with one gallery, and the pandemic just sort of told me, like, you got to do this full time, let's put all your energy into this. And so I did that. And I've been a full-time artist since 2020. And it was at Santa Fe. And that's where I met my partner, Samantha. And that's where we currently reside. And I continue to live there because there's just so much inspiration, art happenings all the time. It's really great to be around that creativity. And there's a lot of contemporary Indigenous artists there. And that's one thing I did not know about. I didn't know what contemporary art was. Like, what do you mean by that? And what is contemporary Indigenous art? And it was there that I discovered, we don't just have to paint a warrior. You do color, geometric shapes. You can do mixed media installations, like all of this digital art. I was just like, wow, this is what I want to do. I thought art was a painting, and I do paintings a little, but I thought it was representational or figurative. And it was down there that I discovered non-objective, non-figurative, abstract. And then I realized that, well, we were doing something similar to this. It's not just these Western European artists or even early American artists that were doing this. Like, it's been happening in North America for thousands of years. And I think that's one thing that I'm trying to share with people is this way of thinking, this way of creating has been here. It's not new. It looks new. And that's where I'm adding the current time, current experience to it. But it's much ancient and older than I think people think. That's what I'm trying to show people too, is that like this is native art. When I work with these ledgers, I guess I'm just trying to reinsert ourselves into just everything life, knowledge of, because we're such old residents of this state and our history goes back thousands of years. But I think of those dates and what was happening, and so a lot of the dates are early 1900s, and by then the eni or the bison were nearly wiped out. So that was our main food, survival, everything we used it. And reservation period was, right afterwards in the 30s. And prior, even before that, we were already being confined. And so I think of those dates when I'm working with this ledger paper. It's American history, but we're adding to it as the original, I guess. Americans are inhabitants of this land. There's just so much history. And I work in a very historical manner too, in terms of knowledge and narratives. And so it just adds, fuels all of that. And it's just really, and then the people who are writing on it, that's just another story as well. This is an entirely different human being that from a different time period, that wrote all this. And I think there's just something special about that as well, to see that some of the ledgers in this show, they're cattle records, receipts from Choteau, Montana, like a store, general store there. And Choteau, Montana is our traditional territory. And, I'm from the Great Plains, so just on the other side of these mountains here. And so that's what these works visually depict as well, is that landscape of the Great Plains. Browning, Montana is right up against the Rocky Mountains. We're in the rolling hills. And then we can see the Sweet Pine Hills down by past Shelby, Montana. And so they just look like islands out on an ocean, plains. And that very much inspires and influences my work. And then the sun and the moon and the stars, they're, we're so rural that at night you see the black sky, and you can see why we depicted and why we have sky stories and these stories, narratives, cultural narratives, why we depicted them on our Blackfoot lodges, our painted lodges. And we were so connected to everything, the land, the universe, and just other beings. And I think that's so great about and fuels my imagination as somebody who is Blackfoot, who is Piikani, to work with these stories, but also adding my own experiences of today to the work as well.